explorers, it's your adventure podcast hostess with the mostest, Katie Staples. I'm going to share my travel stories, tips, and tricks for creating unforgettable experiences and memories. Find me on Instagram at the.great.escape.podcast so you can follow along and I can hear from you. This episode is all about how to make the most out of just a few days in Seattle, Washington. Whether you're a foodie, a nature lover, a city slicker, or whatever kind of adventurer you are, here are some great suggestions for how to see and do and experience a lot in the Emerald City in just a few days. You may know I get to travel a lot for my job, and in the fall of 2023, I got to spend 7 weeks going back and forth between Montana and Hawaii. Each leg, I would have a layover in Seattle. Well, one of those weeks, I had a couple extra days to spend in between the classes that I was teaching, and I had already spent a good time in both Montana and Oahu and Maui, so I decided to take those few days in Seattle to be able to experience it more than just the Delta Sky Club at the airport. Now, of course, when you take the red eye from Hawaii to Seattle, you land at like 5:30 in the morning. So by the time I got my luggage, the rental car place was still not open for a couple of minutes. And then once I got the car at 6 a.m. Pacific time, I couldn't check in until 2. So I did a couple Zooms for work from the rental car and then headed to the downtown area where I found Locust Cider to grab a drink and hang out doing a couple work calls. They have cool flavors like vanilla bean, honey pear, and one of their seasonal flavors out now is strawberry mojito. Then it was off to the famous Pike's Place Market. I think I spent several hours there just wandering around the different shops, enjoying the views, and I got to see the original Starbucks coffee shop. And there's the gum wall. Don't miss that guy. Then I bought a whole bunch of cheese at Beecher's Handmade Cheese, where your own cheese wizard helps you pick out the best charcuterie for you. I stayed both nights at the La Quinta on 8th Avenue, which actually wasn't bad at all. I could see the Space Needle from my room, and it was just a couple blocks to the main part of the downtown area. Of course, I'm going to eat seafood if I'm in the Pacific Northwest. So I found a great place that was maybe like a mile or so away. And while I was walking there, I passed by these lit up gigantic greenhouse looking things on the corner. Turns out those are the Amazon spheres. This is the amazing headquarters for Amazon where their employees get to go work at every day. And when I was just kind of walking around, like looking at how cool it looks from the outside looking in, somebody told me on the first and third Saturdays of the month, they actually open them up to the public to walk around and enjoy all the plants inside. So you best believe I signed up for it the next morning. Then I kept heading on to Luke's Lobster on Pike Street, where I got the flight of the 3 different seafood rolls: lobster, crab, and shrimp. My favorite was the hot buttered lobster roll. The next day, I got to go inside those Amazon spheres. There's several different stories with amazing exotic plants throughout the whole area on both sides of their big building. I can't even imagine getting to be someone that works there in that environment. Like, there is a part near the top where you just lay back in the chairs and relax. There's a living wall with plants like 60 foot tall. You can grab coffee at one of the mini stations throughout the whole building, and even their conference room was super cool. If you are in Seattle, I highly recommend timing your trip for the first or third Saturday morning so that you can be able to experience that. Now, after that, I headed to the northeast part of the city where I could see the famous Fremont Troll. It's a huge sculpture under the Aurora Bridge in the Fremont neighborhood. It's been in movies like Sleepless in Seattle and Twilight. Just FYI, unless you plan to like walk around in the area, this only has to be a 5 to 10 minute stop for you. And there's a cool cidery nearby called the Schilling Cider House. You know, I have to check every place I visit for either a cidery or a meadery. So I hung out there for a little bit while I had a flight of the fruitier stuff that they had on tap at the time. Living in the South for the majority of my life, I am used to spending Saturday afternoons in the fall watching college football. And that day at 1 p.m. was the Alabama-Georgia game that was basically going to decide which of those two went to the national championship. You know, the one where Georgia completely blew out TCU, who shouldn't have been there in the first place. Uh-oh, the inside thoughts are on the outside. Anyway, in all of the places I've lived, it has never been a problem finding a restaurant or a bar or a brewery that played all the major games all day Saturday. Well, guess where I wasn't that day? In the South. I was in the Pacific Northwest, and apparently college football is not nearly as important to these people. Nor do I think that like any televised things really are, because I cannot tell you how many breweries I walked to looking for a place that was showing that game or any football game, really. So then I see that the Crab Pot on Pier 57 near the Seattle Great Wheel is showing the game. Okay, great. More seafood. So I head there to get some snow crab legs, and it was awesome. It actually wasn't as expensive as I expected a restaurant with great water views to be, and they had good fruity cocktails. Since that was the second of my 2 nights in the city, I went back to my room and ate the rest of my charcuterie I bought the day before so that it wouldn't go to waste. And the next morning, I was back at the airport by 8:45. So there is 2 full days of how I spent my time in Seattle. If those suggestions don't suit your fancy, here's a couple more I would do on another trip there. If walking in nature is your thing, hit up the Washington Park Arboretum just northeast of the city. There's an easy 3.7-mile loop around the park. Or if you want something a little bit more challenging, there's a tougher, only 1.3-mile Frink Park loop. Or if you want to go a little bit further south and longer of a trip, there's an 8.8-mile Chief Self Trail that will take a couple of hours. Of course, a lot of people go visit the Space Needle. They're open almost every day of the year, and tickets start at $35 for adults to take in the views from 605 feet up. Also right there is the Chihuly Garden and Glass. It's 8 indoor galleries and landscape gardens of amazing and colorful blown glass sculptures. If you're planning to do both it and the Space Needle, you can get a discounted combo ticket. When you're done, head next door to the Museum of Pop Culture. They have super cool artifacts from the decades, as well as hands-on experiences like the Sound Lab, where you can play with drums, electric guitars, and bring out your inner DJ with the mixing consoles. If museums are your thing, you'll also want to check out the Museum of Flight on the south side of the city. It's the world's largest air and space museum, and it's built around Boeing's original factory. You can actually walk the aisle of JFK's Air Force One aircraft. Admission tickets are usually $29, yet there are a few free days each month, so be sure to visit their website before you go. You can also head to the Klondike Gold Rush National Historic Park. It's a free historical museum where you learn all about the history of the gold rush and see cool artifacts. Well, that's all for my tips on a cool trip to Seattle. Have you been there? What was your favorite part? I would love to hear from you. Find me on Instagram at the.great.escape.podcast and send me a message. And don't forget to hit subscribe so that you can follow along and dream big for your journeys on The Great Escape. See you next time, adventurers.